What are the three features that distinguish a tantric approach? One is that it works very quickly. One is what? What's the other one? Listen, you guys over here.
Something about anticipating success.
It's called assuming success in the text, yes. What the hell does that mean, Matt?
You go forward with the knowledge that it will work.
You're a method actor. Look at this. You want to know this principle right now? Someone gives you a role. What do you do to prepare?
Study it.
You study it. And when you study it, what are you doing?
Becoming it.
You are becoming it. You are assuming the role, aren't you?
Yeah.
You are starting from the premise that you are already there. And you will never forget that, will you? First one is that it's very, very quick. Second one is that it uses role modeling. And the third one is that it assumes the role, or assumes the goal. Okay, let's break those three down. Very important. I found at least 4 characteristics for the first principle, which is that it's very quick. Why is it very quick? I explained to you, if you remember the framework, that in universal Buddhism, you do wisdom training on one side and compassion training on the other. You do insight work to see the bare nature of reality, that it's fluid, it's not concrete, it's a projection. And if it's a projection, then really underneath it, it's more fluid than we perceive it, right? Because when we're traumatized, we barrel down and make things into things. So when that person is pissing you off or when you feel afraid of them, you have concretized them. But actually the nature is much more fluid, beyond your projection. That is wisdom building. It's a projection, it's a projection, it's a projection. It's more fluid than it is. It's more fluid than it seems. I take ownership for my projection. That is the sort of discriminating wisdom that cuts through the nature of reality. The other one is compassion building. Love and compassion are the best medicine. Love and compassion are the best defense. Love and compassion are the best offense. When you get to Tantra, you don't do sequential training. What you do is you combine them into a single art. So when you're visualizing, in order to visualize a deity or B, yourself as that deity, you have to understand emptiness. You have to understand that the ordinary self, the ordinary Joe, the ordinary Miles here is a construction. Because it's a construction, it can be reconfigured. And you realign yourself to the orientation of what's called dissolving the traumatic self. To see that fundamentally you're much more fluid, you're much more capable. It's like an impressionistic art painting. You could put another swath here, another coat of paint here, you could change it. As you're doing that, as you're dissolving your ordinary fixated sense of self, you're also arising in a more sublime sense of self that's filled with love and compassion. So you're doing both trainings simultaneously. And that saves a lot of time because you don't have to go downtown to run on the treadmill and then go to the other place and go and work out on the bench press. You do them all at the same time. Second feature why it's quick. Let me look at my notes. Ooh, multi-dimensional. What does multi-dimensional mean? When you are picturing yourself or imagining yourself in the relationship with a deity or sublime role model, sublime guide, hero's altruist, whatever you want to call it, and then you start to integrate, take them in, and become that thing that you see, you're actually working on a number of different layers of your being simultaneously. From the most coarse in. For example, you start visualizing how you're interacting with the world. That's a behavioral level. You start to reshape your emotional tone by developing love, compassion, and bliss. That's an emotional level. You have a new monoscript or monologue in your mind called a mantra or a new narrative in your mind. So now we have an affirmational level. You have a new self-image. So you have a self-image level. And then underneath all of it, you have an energetic chemical level where you're actually trying to change chemistry which is the last year of the 4-year program, are all on the techniques of the deep science of chemical transformation. So there, in a visualization, you're not just working one layer of your being, but you're working on a human being's a complex thing, isn't it? We're not just our cognitions. We're not just our perceptions. We're also emotional tone. We're also a narrative that we're telling ourselves that frames reality. We're also emotions. We're also self-image. We're also energy, chemistry. We're also our actions, our behaviors. All of that gets consolidated into a visualization. You're working on all of those. And because you're working on all of those, it makes the development very quick. Third rationale, or third point, is that it is what Dan Siegel would call neurologically coherent. The brain science, which I don't know a lot about, forgive me, but you just have to trust me and read Joe's book, is that it works on a number of different brain regions simultaneously. Some meditation techniques calm down the left verbal mind, reduces it, and focuses attention. And then states of bliss or calm start to come up. So very right brain. Some do analysis, where you do your deep penetration on the nature of reality, and for that you need left brain. Some meditation techniques are energetic, like pranayama breathing or kundalini yoga. They go very deep into the core of the being, and you actually go out, inside out. So there's a number of different techniques that operate on different brain regions. Visualization, because of its complexity, is actually making coherent right and left, so you have hemispheric balance, because you both need an analytic mind and an emotional mind. But it's also precortex or prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and core brain. It's working on all three levels. So prefrontal cortex is where we're discerning and making discriminations, making executive choices, planning, constructing, narrating. The limbic brain, what's happening in the limbic brain? Emotions, particularly which one? The amygdala, fear. Also, what's in the limbic region, right next to fear in the amygdala, is the hippocampus, which is responsible for what? Memory. So at the very core, if you remember Dan Siegel, everybody take your thumb, put it into your palm, wrap your 4 fingers over it. So you have your prefrontal cortex right here where the 2 little fingernails are touching. So that's basically your brain, and your brain stem in your head, like this. Right? This region is responsible for all your executive processes. This middle region is responsible for emotions and memory, and the brainstem region is responsible for all the chemical and the action. Okay? And what's happening is all of these are coming in line because you're rehearsing on multi-levels of your being. And that's really, really good, because now you're waking up and dusting off parts of your brain that are normally running on just automatic, like Windows operating. What do you do in a computer? You just minimize the screen and it's still running. It's like outside of consciousness. Here you're bringing consciousness to all parts of your brain. You're going right down into the deep, deep, deep part of your brain. You're working with emotions. You're working with energy. You're working with how the body feels in time and space. You're having a sense of yourself, subjective sense of yourself. You're having a view or constructed view of reality, more optimistic. And when you do that, what you do is you strengthen all these parts. And they come, and Dan Siegel uses this great, great analogy of what integration really means when he talks about if you have a choir and you have 5 people in the choir and each of them sing at different octaves, but each one perfects their voice. In Joseph Campbell parlance, they love their beat. They march to the sound of their beat, and then all of them combine to form a beautiful, coherent sound. And the brain is the same way. Each part of the brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do, but in conscious dialogue with all the other parts. Sings. Just sings. 4th point. Collapses evolution or time. That's what it does. That's what Tantra does. It collapses a large swath of time into a single moment. So this is how you can speed your development, okay? Because in normal life, you're trudging through real-time reality. And maybe you meet a woman or a man and you have some love, but then they break up and then you feel sad. And then you sit on the couch in your therapist's office and you get a little understanding. And that maybe took 15 years. And at the rate and the fees of therapy these days, it doesn't really last that long. You're going like once a week for 45 minutes doing this architecture or spelunking into the psyche to try to maximize your insight. And it's like set apart. It takes a long time. Progress is slow. But what you're doing in a visualization is that you're meeting your mentor, you're meeting your therapist every time you sit down. And you're collapsing an entire life into a single session, including death, birth, and life. In your meditation practice tonight, we're going to do, the part of the practice is that we die. We go through a death process of a dissolving who we think we are so that we can be reborn as something more exceptional, so then we can take it on the road into our life. And you do it once, twice, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and you collapse a whole life into a single session. And all the insights that you gain from that session, it might have taken years and years or an actual death to go through. The Tibetans own the death process. They completely own it, like going to space and putting the flag in the moon. The Tibetans own it. Death process, rebirth, conscious rebirth as an optimal sense of self, and then reintegration, collapse into a hero's journey narrative in one single session. You get off your meditation cushion, then you try to bring it into your life. So that's how it's. These are the 4 principles that make this practice really, really quick. Let's go through them again. What are the qualities that make it really quick? First one was simultaneous training. Second one, multidimensional. Third one, neurologically coherent. And fourth one, collapsing time. Now we go to the second quality, which is the role modeling. This is what, if you remember from our text last semester, this is what Tsongkhapa says is the most defining quality of tantric practice, visualization practice, is that it uses a role model or guide to speed evolution. And there's a very simple reason for that. When you pop out of your mummy, you're a terrified little, dependent, helpless little creature. Okay? Like my son Bodhi, completely helpless. The only way this creature learns is by being spoon-fed from the people that take responsibility for it. So poor little Bodhi, he's out of luck. I'm just kidding. He's stoked. He's stoked. He's totally stoked. He's got 2 Buddhist psychologists for parents. We learn when we're helpless dependents, we look up at our parents and they're basically God. And if they're not God, they're speaking through the blowhorn, and they're speaking God's voice of reality to us. And we're indoctrinated with their perception. And from Dan Siegel's attachment research and stress research, what he said was the narrative that we're inheriting from our parents is largely responsible for our attachment style. Not just the events of impacted relations, but the narrative. How our parents framed their reality, who they thought they were, who you thought you were, how they spoke to you, is largely what determines our attachment style and our functioning. Isn't that incredible? That makes this course so essential, because really what we're working in, whereas last year was the self-image, this one's the narrative. So I'm glad I caught myself when I said, Bodhi out of luck. He's stoked. What I say counts. What I say will be birthed into reality. It matters. Speech matters. Frame of reference matters. It all matters. Nothing can be discarded. Nothing is disposable. So you get the whole principle of you're a little homunculus popping out, totally helpless, and mommy and daddy's there. They're making huge, vast imprints, not just in how they relate to you, but how they store information through their narrative. Human beings are storytellers, so we're inheriting their story. It didn't go so well for a lot of us. So now you get back into therapy or you get back into spiritual practice, and most of us are doing mindfulness meditation, which is an amazing practice of learning how to calm our minds, find deep insight, reverse negative tendencies, cultivate optimal tendencies. Perfectly legitimate practice. However, if you want to speed the process along, you go back to childhood and you bring in a better parent. Now, a lot of people think, well, if I just visualize a deity, will it work? It will have some impact. It will have some impact because what that deity is doing is it's serving as a placeholder for your positive projection or your positive transference or your recall of your most optimal memories. Everybody follow that? But when you actually are working in real time with a human being that is relatively better than your parent, more available, more consistent, better empathy, better insight, nicer story, nicer vibe, and you're coupling it with this daily routine of visualizing and collapsing time and going through the death process, being reborn, soaking in all their positive emotion, their positive attributes, this thing starts to fly. Development gets oiled by the visualization process. Does it make sense? It doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be a spiritual, in the tradition, it's a spiritual teacher. It's your guru, your mentor. So what one does is one takes their guru in real life as a template for a better parent, and you develop a relationship with them so that your memory banks have some recall of their positive, when they're looking at you and their nervous system is open and they have a nice sweet voice, you're collecting new positive information, okay? Then when you go to sit down, you put them in a Superman suit. You put your guru or your mentor in a more exalted, enlightened space and appearance. And if you can, invite in the spirit or the presence of someone you actually have a relationship with that you admire. Now what you're doing is you're filtering out with the image, you're filtering out all their idiosyncrasies, and you're enhancing all their positive qualities. So it's reverse engineering. Instead of falling prey to the negativity bias, you're consciously editing out all the quirks of a real person who you admire and enhancing them like a magnifying glass using the image of an archetype. But remember, you're an organic human being. An organic human being stores based on real-time experience. So like my voice and my energy is essential, not just an abstraction or a concept or an image. It has to have what Joe, my teacher, calls warmth and moisture. The image is a bridge. It takes you out of the terrified relationship where there's quirky and I don't know if you're going to do me, or are you just charging me money and like, can I trust you thing? You kind of filter that out and you go, this is a genuine person. They have genuine interest in me. They're warm. They're sweet enough. They're kind of quirky, but I'm glad I know them. And then you enhance it with this image that has meaning. So you're using the storage of a pleasant, admirable person you actually have a relationship with the overlay of this coded image. It's incredible. The last point was the point about Matt, assuming the goal. So we've covered them, okay? In a very coarse way, we've covered all the rationale. There are 3 points. The first one is? It's fast, and that has 4 counterpoints or midpoints or subpoints. The second one is? Role modeling, which you redo childhood with a kinder, friendlier, gentler human being who has energy and voice and texture and eyesight and memory. And then you overlay it with an archetype. And the third point is you assume the goal. So when you're in your meditation, what you're doing is that you're training your brain to live as your ideal.